Hannah took the letter with trembling fingers. She didn't thank the Reverend Brocklehurst, but gathered her threadbare shawl around her shoulders and stood up to go. There was nothing left to say. Since the moment Jack had been arrested, she'd been at the mercy of others. And it wasn't that she was lazy or didn't want to work. She wasn't afraid of turning her hand to anything. But work was impossible to come by. She walked down the stone-floored aisle of the church and let herself out of the heavy oak door into Churchgate. The sun was shining. Folk were going about their business. A man with a horse and cart was delivering barrels of beer to the Golden Lion. A woman was sweeping the street in front of her door, and the chimneys of the mills were belching smoke and clouding what had been a clear blue sky earlier in the morning. With a heavy heart, Hannah turned for home, to the cottage at Hill Fold, where she lived for 12 years. Her children were sitting on the bare floor when she went in, and they looked up expectantly. Ruth, her eldest, was 11 years old. At the same age, Hannah had sat beside her own mother and learned to spin thread until her fingers became calloused with the work. At first, when her fingers had been painful and the summer sunshine had enticed her out to play, she'd been resentful of the tasks that had been set her, but she'd been well fed and secure, and although she hadn't realised it at the time, she'd been happy. Now, no one wanted homespun cotton. It was all spun in the mills, on huge machines, and many women besides her sat idle in these troubled times. Some were lucky enough to have husbands or fathers to support them. Others, like Hannah, struggled on until the workhouse was their only option. Her middle child, Kitty, was 9 years old. She was the frailest of the three, with a bad cough that never seemed to get any better. Like the others, she was so thin that her sharp bones jutted through her pale skin, and her lips had a bluish tinge, unlike the rosy lips and cheeks of the mill owners' daughters who strutted about the town in their fashionable coats and bonnets. Her youngest was Edmund, her boy. At 7 years old, he was too young to remember his father. She could see the hunger on his stark face, and she was forced to hold back her tears as she shook her head and showed her empty hands. They would all go to sleep hungry again that night, huddled together for warmth under the one blanket she'd kept back from the pawn shop, lying on the thin straw mattresses she'd made after the beds had been sold to provide money for something to eat. It had only been after she'd sold everything she possessed, including all Jack's clothes and his looms, that the parish guardians had agreed to give her anything at all, and now even that was refused to them. "We've been offered a better place," she told the children, trying desperately to make it sound as if their move into the workhouse would be a good thing. "We'll have proper beds to sleep in, and 3 meals a day." Hannah didn't tell them that they would be expected to work hard in return. Dirty, tedious work picking oakum that would make their fingers twice as sore as hers had been when she'd learned to spin. And neither did she tell them the part that would hurt them most of all, that they would be taken away from her and only allowed to see her for a couple of hours of a Sunday afternoon. Hannah knelt down on the hard floor that no longer had so much as a rag rug to soften it and gathered all 3 of her children as close to her as she could. "It'll be all right," she promised them, wondering how on earth it had come to this, and whether there had been anything she could have done to prevent it. Chapter 2. It was hunger, not her own hunger, she could have endured that, but her children's hunger, that drove Hannah to pack up their few meagre belongings and leave home for the workhouse 2 days later. She left the damp straw mattresses and the threadbare blanket. She left the 4 bowls and spoons and her kettle that hung from a chain in the stone fireplace, over a fire that only burned if she could scavenge enough wood and lumps of fallen coal to light it. She packed the few patched clothes they still owned into a sack, and, with her threadbare shawl around her shoulders, she led her barefoot children down the track from the cottage towards Bolton. She saw a few faces at their windows, watching her go, but no one came to their doors to wish her well. They turned away if she glanced at them, maybe afraid that her misfortune would taint them as well if they came too close.